The most expensive thing poor people buy isn't a car, it isn't a phone. It's the way they're forced to think about money. Picture this. You're standing in a grocery store with two carts. One person is calculating calories per dollar. The other is calculating long-term value. They're both managing money, but they're not playing the same game. And that difference matters more right now than most people realize. Because when inflation rises, when debt gets easier to access, when financial freedom becomes a product sold on the social media, the gap isn't just about income anymore. It's about perception, about time, about how money feels when you touch it. Here's the uncomfortable truth. Poor people don't see money as a tool. They see it as a threat. Not because they're irrational, not because they're bad with numbers, but because the system trained them to. Let's rewind. If you grow up poor, money arrives late and leaves early. Bills don't wait. Rent doesn't negotiate. Your bank balance is a countdown timer, not a score. So money becomes something to survive, not something to deploy. When you have very little, every dollar has a job. Food, gas, electricity. If a dollar doesn't do something immediately, it feels wasted. That's not stupidity. That's adaptation. Economists call this scarcity mindset. But that phrase sounds polite and abstract. In real life, it feels like this. You can't afford to think long-term because short-term is on fire. Now here's where the system quietly tightens the trap. When you're poor, money is expensive. Late fees, overdraft fees, higher interest rates. Payday loans at 400% APR wrapped in friendly fonts. A rich person borrows at 6%. A poor person borrows at 60%. Same dollar. Completely different physics. So poor people learn something very specific. Debt is normal. Debt is constant. Debt is unavoidable. But investing? That feels like gambling. Because when your margin for error is zero, risk isn't theoretical. Risk is eviction. So the idea of locking money away for future returns sounds absurd when the present is already charging interest. This is where the math gets cruel. Say someone has $1,000 in savings. If they're wealthy, that's idle capital. If they're poor, that's oxygen. Wealthy money can wait. Poor money can't. So when an unexpected expense hits, a car repair, a medical bill, reduced hours, savings disappear instantly, and the lesson reinforces itself. See, saving doesn't work. Not because saving is bad, but because the system keeps forcing a reset. Now zoom out. This is why poor people often spend money in ways that look irrational from the outside. Fast food instead of groceries. New sneakers instead of a retirement account. A financed TV instead of an emergency fund. But look closer. Fast food saves time when you're working two jobs. Sneakers signal dignity in a world that judges instantly. The TV is a small island of control in a life with very little. Money in this context isn't about optimization. It's about relief. And here's the irony. The more money feels like relief, the less it can become leverage. Because leverage requires patience, and patience requires safety. Now, enter the hype. Every few years, there's a new promise. Crypto, day trading, side hustles, escape the rat race. The pitch is always the same. One big move, one smart play, one shortcut out. And for someone who's been stuck treading water for decades, that's intoxicating. But notice who these systems really reward. They reward people who can afford to lose, people who already have buffers, people who can survive volatility. The poor don't lose because they're reckless. They lose because the downside hits them first and hardest. A 30% loss to a wealthy investor is a bad quarter. A 30% loss to a poor investor is a life event. Same chart, different consequences. This is the hidden mechanism nobody likes to say out loud. Poverty compresses time. Rich people think in years. Poor people are forced to think in weeks. And when you live week to week, interest compounds against you, not for you. That's why financial advice often feels insulting. Just invest early. Just build passive income. Just delay gratification. Delay what exactly? The electric bill? Now, zoom out even further. This isn't just about individuals. It's systemic. When millions of people are locked into short-term thinking, entire markets change. Companies profit from urgency. Credit products multiply. Subscription models thrive. The economy starts feeding on financial stress instead of stability. And here's the quiet risk. When money is always seen as something that disappears, trust erodes. Trust in institutions. Trust in banks. Trust in the future. People stop planning, they start coping, and a society built on coping doesn't invest well. It doesn't innovate patiently. It doesn't handle shocks gracefully. So the real divide isn't rich versus poor. It's who gets to see money as time and who is trapped seeing it as a ticking clock, which raises a question we almost never ask. If your financial behavior is shaped less by intelligence and more by survival pressure, then how much of bad money habits are actually personal choices, and how much are the predictable result of a system that punishes anyone who can't afford to wait?